Hi, I'm Wendy from Flannel Board Fun. Thank you so much for choosing a Flannel Board Fun pattern. I hope you'll enjoy making it as much as you enjoy using the finished set with your kids. Now, I intentionally design patterns that are simple, basic to cut, glue, and paint. That said, what seems simple to one person might not seem so simple to another. We all have different learning styles and different levels of experience. So I've included some video tips for those people who need it. There are tips on choosing tools and materials, tips on printing your pattern, cutting your pattern, gluing, assembling, and painting your set. So if you need to skip ahead or skip around through all the segments, the start times for each section are listed in the description below. With that said, let's get started. Okay, I want to take a minute to just go through everything you get with your Flannel Board Fun pattern download. You've actually got 4 downloads, so let's go through each one so you know what's what. The first is your quick start guide. This little guy has pretty much everything you need to know in nice condensed form. You can print this out, but the best way to use it is by viewing it as a download on your computer because it's full of links. Right here, it tells you about everything you get in your downloads, your instructions and visual guides, this quick start guide and general guidelines, printable pattern pages and lyric cards, and links to quick video tips and recommended tools. This is a big link to the video that you're watching right now, so you can always go back easily and access it here. Here are the materials and tools I recommend, and each of these again is a link so you can get more information on them. They're not affiliate links. I just want to make things easy for you if you're interested in checking out what I really like. And then you've got quick little instructions on printing, cutting, and taping your pattern, and again a link to those video tips if you need more information. Then this section gives you a quick rundown of assembling, gluing, and painting your felt set, and again a clickable link to the video tips of those topics. Finally, I just encourage you to go off and make your set after you've gone through the basic steps of learning what to do with your Flannel Board Fun pattern, and you've got the simple pattern download option if you're an old pro and quite crafty, and then you've got the detailed pattern download if you want more guidance if you're new to making flannel boards. There's a few other links at the bottom that you can check out, and after you're done with that start guide, we can move on to the general guidelines. Okay, your second download is your general guidelines. This is a nice little visual and written guide that goes along with all of the Flannel Board Fun patterns. On this side, we've got prep and cut tips. So they show and explain the best way to cut out your pattern, do a little dry run assembly of your set before you glue. And then on the next page, we've got assembly tips. Again, these are written and visual tips on how to assemble, glue, and paint your pieces. So all of these tips are general guidelines, and they can be used for all Flannel Board Fun patterns. Specific instructions that go into the details of each particular set are included within the detailed pattern download you received, and I'll go over those next. So as I mentioned in the introduction, we all have different levels of experience. I mean, I used to have absolutely no idea where I could even buy felt, let alone how to cut it. So if this is your first time making a flannel board, you might need all the help you can get. On the other hand, if you're a crafter or have been making your own felt sets for a long time, you're probably not even watching this video. In any case, I wanted to cover all the bases and provide a very detailed pattern download for newbies, as well as a simple pattern download for old pros. This way you can choose which one works best for you. Let's go over these guys using this gnome set as an example. We'll start with the detailed instructions. Okay, so your detailed instructions have an area that lists the felt colors and quantities that you're going to need to make your set. It gives you a little rundown of the time it should take to make your set, but that is definitely going to depend on your experience and how many people interrupt you. There's a little link to see this particular set in action if I've made videos using the set. And then if you are not working in inches and need to convert to centimeters, you can do that here. There's a little link on the download, and then more links to the video tips. Now, with this detailed instruction set, you then get written and visual instructions on how to cut, glue, and assemble your set. You also get a visual guide, which is basically those same instructions, but just in a more condensed version, and it shows you where to put your glue, if there are layers involved in your set and it matters which piece gets glued first, they are numbered. So for example, with this gnome set, you need to glue your beard first, your nose second, and your hat third. With the mushroom, it doesn't matter which order, so these steps are not numbered. Again, these gnome instructions are basically the same as what's listed here on your visual guide. It's just kind of reinforcing the concepts. And then with your detailed pattern, you've got your pattern pages. It tells you to print them out. You can print them in color or black and white. The pattern pieces are shown in color, and they also have the written words. So when you are going to match these up to your felt pieces, color coding it will be very easy. And again, with a detailed pattern, even though you have pieces that are exactly the same but in different colors, I've provided a pattern piece for each of those pieces. You cut them all out. And then your last page of your pattern is your lyric card. And the way we do this is we just fold it on that dotted line so it can fit more easily into wherever you store your felt sets. And I would recommend laminating this because you'll probably be using it over and over again. So that is your detailed flannel board fun pattern and instructions. Okay, the simple instructions are similar to the detailed instructions, they just have less detail because I'm assuming if you're using these, you kind of know what you're doing already. You don't need as much detail. So on the front page, again, it has your felt colors and quantities that you're going to need to create this set. Gives you a little estimate of the time it will take you to make the set, videos of the set in action, video quick tips, and then just a very quick basic instruction rundown of how you cut, tape, glue, etc. On the simple instructions, that's pretty much it for your instructions. You then get a visual guide, which has any gluing and layering advice that I have. And with the simple instructions, you only get the absolutely necessary pattern pieces. So, for example, in the gnome set, every gnome's body is the same. So you only need one pattern piece for the gnome's body, and you'll cut 5 of these. Every gnome's beard is the same. You'll only cut one of the pattern piece, and you'll cut 5 felt pieces. You'll only cut one pattern of the hat, but you'll use it to cut 5 felt hats. So that's the main difference between the detailed and the simple patterns. With the detailed pattern, you're going to get 5 actual paper pattern pieces to cut out, and with the simple one, you'll just have one and reuse it to cut over and over again. And there's the rest of your pattern page. And then again, you have your lyrics that you will fold, cut, and laminate if you want to. So that is quick rundown of what your simple instructions contain. Okay, so now you know what you've got with your purchase, you lucky duck. If you're ready to dive right in and get started making your set, go for it. Print out either your simple or detailed pattern, grab your scissors and felt, and have at it. On the other hand, if you're feeling like you need a little more guidance on how to get started, keep watching or skip around to the section you want to watch. The links are all in the description below. Okay, let's talk about tools and materials. What do you need to have on hand to make a felt set? The list is short, I'm happy to say. First, the tools. You're going to need a pair of small, pointy, sharp scissors. The link to these Fiskars Easy Action Micro Tip Scissors is in your start guide and in the description below. I can't recommend them highly enough. They are spring-loaded, which will totally save your hands from strain if you're going to be doing a lot of cutting. Plus they're small and sharp with a tiny point, so you can really get into curves and small spaces nicely. I'll show you what I mean in the cutting sections. If you've already got a different brand of small sharp scissors, try them out before you switch to these guys. I love these, but I need the spring-loaded action, and you might be just fine with another pair. The most important thing really is small, sharp, and pointy. All right, next is tape. You're going to be using this to tape your pattern pieces to your felt. I use a generic brand of Scotch tape or invisible tape. It needs to have a stronger hold than masking or washi tape. You want the pattern pieces to stay in place as you cut, but you don't want a super strong tape like packing tape, which can end up stretching the felt when you remove the extra tape after cutting. More on that later, but basically you want this kind of tape, invisible tape. Up next is glue. Now, each glue has its pros and cons. I personally have not found anything better than this Beacon Fabri-Tac glue. You don't need a lot at all, and it gives permanent, nice, flexible results. Plus, it dries almost immediately, but not so fast that you can't reposition something if you need to. This is definitely my favorite, but if you have a glue that's labeled for craft, or felt, that can work too. Some people use Aleene's tacky glue. I am not a huge fan of it, but I do know a lot of people have success with it, and I know people use hot glue guns as well. I just find them difficult to deal with, and Fabri-Tac to me seems basically like hot glue. In fact, I think sometimes they say it's like a glue gun in a bottle. So anyway, it's up to you. You can experiment with lots of different kinds of glues and find your favorite. And our final tool is fabric paint. Most of my sets really use very little of it, but when I do add paint details, I use Scribbles fabric paint. They seem to be changing the labels. I'm pretty sure this is a newer label as of the filming of this video, but this is the kind that I use. And I like this size of bottle because I find it easier to squeeze and control than the sometimes larger bottles that you might find in the store. But do what works for you, of course. In cases where you just need a tiny dot of black for an eye, a permanent marker can work as well. And that's it for tools: scissors, tape, glue, and paint. The end. Okay, so we had our tools, but now we have materials as well. And the material that we're going to be using is, of course, felt. Yay, the colorful part. So you have several options here. You can find acrylic felt, which is also called craft felt, online or in craft stores like Joann, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, or wherever you buy craft supplies. This is your least expensive option, and it's absolutely fine if you're going to be using your set as a story time or circle time prop used just by adults. If your set is going to be handled repeatedly by children, I'd go with either 100% wool felt or my favorite, which is wool blend felt. I love wool blend felt for the amazing colors. It's also very easy to cut and doesn't shred or fray. So it's more durable than acrylic felt and stands up to repeated use by children, 3 and older, of course. So here are some samples of acrylic felt. If you can go to a store when you buy it, that's your best bet because you can hold up the sheets to light to find the thickest or least see-through pieces. The quality really can vary quite a bit with acrylic felt. Sometimes you'll have really see-through spots in it. But it is inexpensive and absolutely perfectly fine for making a felt board set. Now, this is 100% wool, and as you can see, it's quite thick, quite a bit thicker than the acrylic felt, which is nice. It's high quality, but it makes it a little more difficult to cut cleanly, and it's a bit bulky and heavy for an upright board when you start layering. So it is an option, it's just not the option I use. And then these are samples of the wool blend felt that I use. It's thicker than acrylic felt, but it's not too thick or heavy, so it layers really well. There's a link in the description in your start guide to an online shop that carries this lovely stuff. So now that you know the materials and tools you're going to need to make your set, let's start talking about making it. The first thing you need to do is print your pattern pages. Your download comes with instructions and visual guides like these, pattern templates like these, and lyric cards like this. Now, you can print all of this or just some of it. The only pages you actually need to print are the actual pattern pages and the lyric cards if you're going to be using them. And these are all marked at the top like this. Print, print, print. The other pages you can just refer to on the screen if you want to save ink and or paper. Now, the original pattern was designed on 8.5 by 11-inch paper, but it's easily printed on A4 size if that's what you're using. If you're printing on 8.5 by 11, simply print as you normally do. If you're printing on A4, you want to just select A4 as your paper size and tick the Fit to Printable Area box. The wording might be a little different depending on your printer, but since the paper sizes are so similar, you really can't go wrong. These patterns are printed in the size that is indicated on the front page of your pattern instructions. If you want to, you can enlarge them or make them smaller, but these are the sizes that I use to make flannel board sets for my story times, so they're nice and chunky. Now, one other thing you can choose when you're printing is to print in color or in black and white. The patterns that I created in color. But I've also put the color name in print on each piece. So you need those to be able to match your pattern pieces to the correct color of felt. Either way, printed in black and white or color, it will work either way. So you choose. Okay, so once you've got all the pages printed that you want to use, it's going to be time to start cutting out the pattern pieces. Your instructions tell you to cut just outside the line, and here's what I mean by that. Let me give you an example. Cut out this white beard, and when I say just outside the line, I really just mean just outside the line. So you can be pretty rough with this. You don't want to leave too much white space around the edge like that, because you're going to need your tape to cover both the line and the felt. So you need to keep that distance pretty small. But this just is, you don't have to be exact on the line when you're cutting this piece. Okay. Another thing for me to note here is that for some sets, like for example this gnome set, if you're using the simple instructions, you're just going to be cutting out one pattern piece for certain pieces and reusing it again and again. Whereas if you're using the detailed instructions, you're going to be cutting multiples. So for example, in this set, there are 5 beards to be cut. If I'm using the simple instructions, I'm cutting out one beard pattern piece and reusing it for all 5 beards. If I'm using the detailed instruction method, I'm cutting out all 5 of these beard pattern pieces, and I will use each piece for its own beard, felt beard. Okay, so I'm going to cut these all out, and I'll speed this up so you don't have to watch me cut them all in real time. Okay, so now you've got all your pattern pieces cut out, and you're going to need to tape them to their coordinating felt colors. Now, this is where the measuring of your felt could come in. The first page of your instruction sheet lists the approximate amount of each color of felt you'll need. By the way, these measurements are in inches, and you can convert them to centimeters here if you want to, or you could just use the inch edge of a ruler if you have one. Most rulers have centimeters on one side and inches on the other. So if I'm saying inches and you're like, I have no idea what that is in centimeters, just flip it to the inch edge of your ruler and use that. So, but here's the deal. You really only need to measure the felt out if you're very particular. The amounts listed are just approximate to give you a general idea of how much of each color you'll need. But if you do decide to measure the felt, so for instance, this says I need a 3 by 4 inch scrap of pink. So if you decide to measure your felt, you just do that. So it's 3 and 4. So I need a piece about this big. Again, you don't need to be super particular. I've just given you the measurements that will be big enough to fit your piece onto. So that's my 3 by 4 inch-ish piece of pink, and my felt pattern piece my pattern piece fits right onto that. So that's sometimes how I'll do it. I'll cut my piece first, but other times I'll just take a piece of felt and say I need this brown, and I just lay the pieces on it. Let's pretend, oh, this one is brown too. So I lay my pieces out on it that way. Then I tape them down, which I'll show you in the next section, and then I cut them out instead of measuring out that felt first. It's easier just to kind of lay them out and then cut around them. Okay, the next step is to tape all these pattern pieces down. So let's do that. So what you want to do for nice, crisp, clean, smooth cut lines is to tape your pieces down along the edges of each piece, overlapping the tape so it covers the line and goes over the edge of the paper onto the felt. You want this tape to be securely holding the pattern piece down so that as you cut, the piece isn't shifting around at all. All right, so once you've got all of those edges securely taped down, you can start cutting. You want to cut directly on the line so you've got good guidance. So I cut out that section that I've taped all those pieces to first, and then I might even cut around, you know, one at a time so I don't have to deal with all of this felt hanging off. So you've got it taped down, that pattern piece is not going to move, and you want to just cut right through the line, the tape, the paper, and the felt. This is really cutting through that stuck down pattern piece that is not shifting around is what's really making it nice and crisp. And then having a line to follow is going to make it look just like what the pattern looks like. So you've got that nice, crisp, clean line. Now, you keep doing that with all your pattern pieces, and I will not make you sit through the whole thing, but I know people like to watch this kind of stuff, so I'll speed it up and let you watch me cut out this whole set. What I want to show you is that if you're using the simple pattern and you have a set like this where pattern pieces are used for multiple cuts, this is how you do it. So you've got this one says white beard, cut 5. So I'm going to cut my first beard out, and when I'm done cutting it, it is not really going to have much of a cut line left. But I'm supposed to reuse this 4 times. So how can I do that? It does have a little bit of a cut line, but eventually that's gonna be disappearing. So it's not a problem. All you do is retape that piece. And this time, when you cut it out, you're not gonna use the cut line, you're just gonna use the edge of the paper as your guide for cutting. This would probably have been smarter to do in a different color, but that's okay. I'm not sure how well you're going to really be able to see this on the screen. But so with the original one, I cut right on the black line. Now I don't really have a thick black line to cut on, so I'm reusing this beard pattern piece, and I'm just cutting right along the edge. Instead of cutting through the paper, I'm just cutting next to the paper. And what's actually going to happen is, as you keep retaping this beard piece to get your 5 beards cut out, as you keep taping it, and of course I've run out of white felt now, so I can't show you another one. We'll just make a brown beard. But as you keep reusing this pattern piece, this thick tape layer that's getting built up on it as you keep taping it down is actually making a nice sturdy pattern piece, and that thicker piece is becoming an easy guide. It kind of guides you along as you're cutting next to it. You'll see what I mean as you do this if you choose to do it this way. So again, this is when you're using a simple pattern and you have repeating pieces. I've just given you one pattern piece to cut multiple pieces of felt out with, and if you're using the detailed pattern, you have a separate piece for each felt item that you're going to be cutting. So hopefully that made sense. I think it did. And that is your cutting of the pattern and felt together. Okay, so most flannel board fun sets are intentionally simple to create, and they don't have a million layers or small parts to glue together. Even so, I think it's a good idea to lay out your felt set once all the pieces have been cut, and put the pieces together so you know that everything fits and you're familiar with any layers you need to glue. That's what I call a dry run assembly. So, for example, with this gnome set, we're using our visual guide, which has images and photographs and digital images to show us exactly where everything goes. So for example, with this gnome set, we're laying out all our gnomes and all their beards and noses, and we're kind of looking at our visual guide so we can see where everything's going to fit, so that when we're ready to glue, we don't have any surprises. This helps us know that we've actually remembered to cut all our pieces out, because sometimes you might get a little distracted and realize at the end, oops, I forgot to cut out a nose, or I cut out 2 pink hats instead of just 1, that kind of thing. So this is an important step. Of course, if your set has no layers, you're not going to need to do this part. But if it does have any layers or extra pieces that you might have miscounted or forgotten to cut, this is a good step to do. Again, that's your dry run assembly. Use your visual guide to help you make sure you have all the pieces, and this way you're really familiar with how things go together before you get to the gluing step, which is next. Okay, so once you've got your felt set pieces all laid out in their dry run assembly, you know where all the layers are going to go. It's going to be time to start gluing. And as I've told you, I really love this Beacon Fabri-Tac glue. The only issue I have with it is that it sometimes gets a little stringy, so I just keep a rag or tissue or a scrap of felt on hand, and I wipe those strings or clumps of glue off the tip if they start to build up. And another little tip for you is to use a little bit of petroleum jelly, just a little swipe, and then I dab it onto the tip of the glue bottle, and for some reason that helps keep those strings a little bit to the minimum. So that's a good tip to use. Now, gluing itself, what you want to do is just apply small dots of glue or lines of glue, but keep it light, and you want to stay pretty close to the edge of the pieces, but not too close. You don't want any of the glue to seep out the edges when you press the pieces together. So light on the glue, keep a rag on hand to wipe off your strings if they start to accumulate. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this gnome set together. Again, you want to use your visual guide. It gives you tips on the order you need to glue certain pieces together if it matters, and it also just kind of gives you a reminder of what your pieces are supposed to look like. So I keep this on hand, and I'm going to go ahead and glue these cuties together. I wanted to give you guys a few tips on cutting more intricate parts. Now, there aren't a ton of intricate parts in any of my patterns, but you'll run across pieces here and there. So here are some tips, or just more detailed instruction on cutting those trickier pieces. So for example, here's a letter P from my apple set, and you'll notice that you've got this center space that you need to cut out. So for this type of cut, you just want to make sure you cut that middle piece out of the paper before you tape it down. And then you just want to make sure you apply tape to that middle section. You want to make sure there's no shifting when you're cutting the P. And again, when you're cutting the actual felt out, you want to cut that center spot first. This tape around the edge is going to keep your P in place. If you cut all of that stuff out first, your P would be loose, and this would not be cutting nice and crisply. So cut that center spot out first. There you go. Okay, next we've got a unicorn from my 5 unicorn set, and this piece has just some more detail than the pieces I've been showing you before, which mostly have had straight or slightly curved lines, but this has got some ins and outs. So with a piece like this, you do want to make sure you're not leaving a lot of empty white space. You see how I've cut into these spaces between his legs and the tail and the legs there. You just want to get pretty close to the edges there when you're doing your rough cut. Another tip is when it's a larger piece, make a little loop of tape and put that on the back in the center area, because as you cut this guy and he becomes loose, those sections that you cut become loose from the paper, you want him to stay put as much as possible. So that little loop of tape, or 2 loops of tape in this case, on the back is going to help with that. The last piece I want to show you is this large piece of mud. It's mud, and it's the same pattern piece for the water in my 5 Muddy Pigs set. So this is quite large and quite curvy. So what you want to do is definitely put your loops of tape on the back in any areas that sort of stick out from the center, because again, as you cut those lines, when you cut through the tape, it's going to make the piece a little bit loose, so you want to keep it as stable as possible with loops on the back. You really only need to do this for large pieces that are going to be cumbersome if they're flopping around on you. You do that, and then you still want to tape around the edge. I wanted to show you a way that I glue large pieces together. So for example, this is the water and mud from my 5 Muddy Pigs set, and it's layered together. And if I've already glued half of it, so I can't show you the whole thing, but if I just laid this blue one out and put glue dots all over it, I would then have to position this brown piece over it exactly. So instead, I layer it together, put it in the exact right position, and then I peel up half of it, and I put the glue dots and lines, or however you find it easiest for you to glue. I put the glue on when only half of it is removed, peeled back like that, and then that way it's just really simple to lay it back right into place. I've already glued this half, so this half is already done. But so what you do is you take your one piece, you put it down, you layer your second piece on top exactly where you need it to be, peel back half, apply your glue, fold it back over, flip it, peel back half, apply your glue, and fold it over. That is a really easy way to get large pieces glued together. It doesn't have to be pieces that are exactly lined up the same piece like this. This is pretty rare, but if you have like a roof for a house or really any large pieces, you just flip back half, put the glue on, and flip it back down. Hope that helps. Time to paint. Of course, you should know that you don't need to add details of fabric paint. You can skip most of them altogether if you prefer. The one thing I almost always add is a black dot for an eye. But other than that, it really is optional. That said, you can also go wild with your paint and add even more detail than I've shown in my designs. It's completely up to you. But I do have some practical tips if you're going to use the paint. My first tip is to try to make your paint tips, the tips of the bottle, as smooth as possible. Sometimes they'll come with a little snag. You could use an emery board to file it off. Just be light with that. You don't want to mess up the tip too much, but you just want to get any of those snaggy bits off. Usually they come snag free. I just occasionally will get a little tab of plastic on there. You can even trim it off with a pair of scissors if you need to. My second tip is to always shake your bottle first before applying your paint to the felt. And I usually do a practice run on a scrap of felt or a scrap of paper. That way you can just be sure you're getting any bubbles out and that things are running smoothly. And it also gets you used to the runniness or the thickness of that particular bottle of paint. They do vary by color, and over time the paint might thicken up a little bit. So it's good to do a little practice run before you get started. If there are longer lines of paint needed for a piece, such as the lines on this unicorn mane, I might apply the paint as I used to apply icing lines to cupcakes. You can find tutorials for that online, but basically what you do is you get your paint started and then you sort of lift it and squeeze as you draw the line in the air. So it's sort of like this. Instead of just running my tip of my paint bottle along the felt, I get it started and then I'm lifting it up a little bit as I drag like that. That is a little bit different than doing it that way. Okay, that's everything. I hope these video tips have been useful in helping you to understand how to cut your pattern, cut your felt, glue and paint your felt board set, and I hope you're excited to get started. If you have any questions, you can email me at hello@flannelboardfun.com, and thanks again for choosing a flannel board fun pattern. Enjoy!